All right, give it a moment to make sure that we are recording. So today I want to talk a little bit about three-column journal, a method of journaling, and I'd like to see if you all would be willing to devote yourselves, I guess, or dedicate yourselves, or make an effort to actually use this for perhaps the rest of the year. And notate and share as part of our Sangha, and also for me as part of some unscientific research, your results from using this rational thought. Let's see. So I don't know what, if anything I do makes this go away so that you can't see it, let me know. Because I don't know what you all see. I only know what I'm trying to present. So, okay. So what we have, three-column journal. Why do the three-column journal? Why am I bringing this up here? And so first off, this, you know, we get caught up. We get trapped into patterns of thought and patterns of behavior, and sometimes we can't escape them. We just keep doing the same things over and over again, you know, and we often lack the tools to make the changes that we would really like to make the changes, and sometimes we adopt unhealthy ways of changing. We might try to repress a thought, and repressing is not very good. Repressing just means it's still there. It's just not on the surface yet. And the more we repress, the greater the chances are that it's just going to explode. Also, positive thinking isn't necessarily always good. Positive thinking just means the thought is still there. We're just trying to overlay it with some positive thought. It doesn't change the origin of the thought. And so what this is it's a method to reprogram your thinking process. Now, the thing about when reprogramming the mind is that the mind cannot reprogram itself effectively, but the body can reprogram the mind. The body in conjunction with the mind can reprogram the mind. And that's actually been shown to be the most effective way to reprogram ourselves. So, what we're doing in the three-column journal is we're creating new neural pathways for dealing with, for living in life, and we're engaging both the mind and the physical body in a process of looking at what we're doing and deciding a different way. Again, the mind cannot do it on its own to itself, because the mind gets caught up in this cycle, this obsessive cycle of thinking and more thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking about thinking and so on and so forth. So for an example here, what I've got here, the three columns are negative thought goes in the first column. The error in thinking goes in the middle column. And the rational thought goes in the final column. So just as an example, say your spouse or good friend is always late. You know, you set an engagement to do something, and you know they're 30 minutes late, maybe even late enough to cause you to miss the start of a performance, a play or something like that, a movie. Or maybe, you know, it's a dinner date and you know, you've got a group of people and you can't start until they get there. So you know, some initial thoughts might be, and this isn't, you know, your thoughts could be anything. This is just an example. So they're late. So, you know, one thing, I've got neighbors that are really, really loud. Not all the time, but occasionally. It's just very loud. They yell and scream. And, you know, one of the thoughts in my mind is, man, they are so inconsiderate. I'll be honest. You know, I think, you know, they're selfish, they're inconsiderate, all of these things. Nobody else in the neighborhood is nearly as loud as they are. In fact, nobody else in the neighborhood is anywhere loud at all. And they're not even the biggest family. So, you know, an honest thought is they're inconsiderate. They only think of themselves. And we could say that about, you know, the person who's late. They're always late. They're just so inconsiderate. So what's the error in this thought? Well, the error is that you're labeling them. You're giving them a label. You're calling them a name. Well, that doesn't, what does that accomplish? Does that change anything? That just reinforces your negative thought. You know, it's sort of a self-justification that somehow or another you're better than they are. You're right. They're inconsiderate, but you're not. See, it's sort of that comparison, that elevation of self and de-elevation of other to prove you're right. And this just leads to more unhappiness because it's the cycle. You know, they're late, okay? That's a fact. All this other stuff, your discomfort, your unhappiness, your ill at ease, that's all within you. See, but how do you get rid of that thought? Well, you know, you say, oh, I shouldn't think that. And so you repress it. Or you decide to say, well, I'll just, you know, I'll try to change and think positive thoughts. But what this journal is, and this is a journal, this isn't a mental exercise. This is actually writing it out every day, you know, in a little book, sheet of paper, whatever, what have you. Write this out, because this is how we reprogram, is we engage in a physical activity that is attached to the positive thing that we want to change. And this is really critical. You know, even science says the most effective way of learning is to write it. You know, people who engage in active note-taking in classes actually learn better and faster and more than people who just try to keep it in their mind, or even who type it on a keyboard. So, you know, I can't show you right now because I'd have to stop the share and start it again. But when we're done, I'll try to show you my scribble handwriting. And, you know, it's not neat. It's not for anybody. It's just for me. And I don't even have to read it later on. And that's the whole thing, is that just write it down. So at the end of the day, if you only remember one thing or two things, just write them down. Say, okay, remind yourself this happened, whatever it was, the negative thought attached to that thing. Maybe it's the example that I'm using. Maybe somebody important to you is always late and you just, they were late again today. That's really inconsiderate. Ugh. And then you think, okay, what's the error in my thought? Maybe your error might be mind reading. Maybe you just, you know, maybe you're trying to read their mind. Maybe you're the omnipotent superior being in the relationship. So it might be mind reading. It might be catastrophizing. Catastrophizing, sorry about that. Catastrophizing, making it a big catastrophe, when really it's just a small little thing. You have to determine what's your error in thinking, but be open to the fact that there is an error in your thinking process. Because, you know, you don't know that they're inconsiderate. You know, maybe it's just a label. Maybe when you put a label on something, you're identifying it to be less than you. I mean, that's or different than you. Labeling says, okay, I've got this category over here for this thing or this person or this behavior. And it doesn't include us always. Mind reading is I know that they don't give a crap about anybody but themselves. But you don't know that. You only guess that from circumstantial evidence. The rational thought is I don't know. We'll talk about it later. Or let's talk about it. I mean, maybe they just don't care. Maybe being on time is not an important thing to them. Does that make them bad? No, it just makes it, time isn't one of their factors of criteria of being a good person. Maybe other criteria are in play. You know, I've known people who are just late. I mean, they're just late sometimes. I mean, all the time. You know, myself, I like to be early. I didn't always like to be early. I was okay with being on time or a few minutes late. But something changed, and I'm much more comfortable if I'm 10 or 15 minutes early. I would rather sit and wait for something to begin than to be rushing. And that's part of the shift in my temperament, that I need more space in between things so that I can transition slowly from one activity to another activity. So for me, when I'm going to meet somebody for lunch, and I have a few people that I occasionally meet for lunch, I like to get there early because I like to have that space from transitioning from finding the place or driving there to actually being present in that space and then being able to engage them in conversation or whatever it is, the enjoyment of the meal. So the rational thought is, I don't know why they're late. Let's talk about it. You know, maybe they are consistently. Maybe they had a flat tire. Maybe they just didn't want to come see you and they put it off to the last minute. You may or may not discover the real reason, but you can hold space. So the more you engage in this kind of activity, the less you revert to the labeling and the negative thinking, because you then begin to train your mind physically and mentally into focusing on the rational thought. Okay, you know, like Bill may remember, you know, one of the things for years I've taught enlightenment by driving. This concept of how to attain enlightenment while driving your car, especially in rush hour traffic. You know, there in the UK, Davey, y'all don't drive too much, do you?
No.
Yeah, I know. Because you wouldn't get anywhere for a day or two, especially if you're driving in London. You know, you're just not going to go anyplace. And sometimes Paris can be the same way. Charlotte is like that to some degree, but in Charlotte, there's no other alternative but to drive. And I don't know the traffic down there in Tuscaloosa there. Trey, how's the traffic there?
It depends on if school is in or out. It is a college town, so when
Yeah.
we have like 10,000 extra vehicles on the road, so
Wow. Yeah.
not as good on.
And it wasn't designed. I mean, the old southern college towns were not designed for cars. So, and as the university has expanded over the years, I'm sure it's become even worse. 10,000 extra cars in a town that's, what's your normal population? Maybe 5,000 or something like that?
Yeah, probably somewhere. I don't know. I'm thinking maybe it's probably about around 10,000, and then they just added. They basically doubled us.
Yeah.
And when a football game is in town, it's even worse because then you have the entire state has come to Alabama. I mean Tuscaloosa. So
yeah.
We just don't go out on game days. We stay in, go and get everything we need on Friday, and then stay in on the Saturday.
Yeah. So you know, so how do you attain enlightenment by driving? Well, you know, and this is my process. How I began to develop this practice, and I think that if you can do it, if you can attain enlightenment while driving, for those that drive, you can do it by anything. So you know, when I first started thinking about this years and years ago, you know, it all began with a cuss cup at work. Every holiday season, beginning at Halloween, we'd have this little cup. And anytime anybody said a swear word, you had to put a quarter in. And if you said one of the really, really bad swear words, you had to put $1 in. And so this cuss cup would sit in the middle of the workspace. And then at Christmas, we'd have a big party with the money in the cuss cup. Well, that got me to thinking. I mean, I didn't mind chipping in a quarter or whatever every time I said, fuck or shit or whatever, when you mess up a job or something like that. So I didn't mind doing that. But then I got to thinking, well, why do I do that? Is there some other way that I can express my frustration, my anger, or whatever? And then I got, I was in my car and I was thinking, it's like, I don't really need to cuss. And I thought, I'm a Buddhist. Theoretically, I should be able to behave differently. And so then I thought, okay, well, let's make a change. Let's stop cussing. And so this was about 1998. And I just quit cussing. I didn't contribute any money to the cuss cup, and I got to go to the party for free. No, I'd chip in something at the end. It was a good paying job, so I could afford it. When I was driving, I decided, okay, I'm going to not be angry. Well, at first, it was just suppressing. I'd still be angry. I just wouldn't be doing anything outwardly. Anything. I wouldn't be, honking my horn. I wouldn't be flipping them off. I wouldn't be yelling and screaming and cussing or whatever. I'd just be angry, but it would be inside. So I'd internalize it all. I'd suppress it. And then I got to thinking, and then I went through the positive thinking. Well, it's a good day. It's a good day. The sun is shining, this kind of thinking. I'm a good person. I'm happy, in spite of the fact that inside I was still really pissed. So, and then I got to think, well, that's not really what Buddhism is about. It's not about suppressing something. It's about changing. So how do I change? And then I got to thinking, and I didn't have all this journal at the time. This is a really clever idea, and this it actually mirrors my process, but I think much more effectively because it engages the body in a different way. And I didn't have that tool at the time. I wasn't journaling. I wasn't writing. This kind of research hadn't been done. But what I did was I started thinking, wait, I'm accusing that person of doing something. And I don't have a clue as to whether my accusation, my judgment, my observation is true. And then, I began to study nonviolent communication. And some of the principles in nonviolent communication is to observe without judgment. So what happened? Well, what happened is that person, not an idiot, but that person, that driver, steered his car in front of my car. Perhaps too close. Perhaps that resulted in me having to apply my brakes. Maybe I had to slam on the brakes, but most of the time it's just applying the brakes. Well, that's all I really know. I don't know if they're an idiot. I don't have time to give them an IQ test. And I'm pretty sure that they did not wake up that morning and say, I'm going to get Ruscio. I'm going to find out where he's driving, and I'm going to pull my car in front of him and cause him to apply his brakes, slam on his brakes. I'm sure that driver was not on a personal vendetta to inconvenience my driving. And yet I've taken it very personally. Well, I don't know. I mean, the odds are they didn't. The odds are they weren't out to get me. So what happened? Well, they just pulled in front of me. I can't prove that they did it on purpose. In fact, I can almost prove that they didn't do it on purpose. I can't prove that they're an idiot. Maybe they are driving recklessly. Well, if they are driving recklessly, should I get involved in that? You know, I mean, in my best interest, should I get involved in their reckless driving, or should I just let them drive on ahead and be reckless? You know? Well, this is a different process than suppressing or thinking positive thoughts. I haven't thought any positive thoughts. I've just made it rational. And that's a different feeling when you begin to do that on a regular basis. It also generates different responses, both physiologically within you and and physically. My stomach didn't get all in knots from trying to suppress it. All my acid juices and stuff in my digestive system didn't get triggered, on my way home from work. And then I've got to go eat dinner and I'm all upset, or cook dinner and I'm all upset. I'm not all upset anymore. I don't know why it happened. I mean, there could be somebody passed out on the passenger side and they're rushing to the hospital. I don't know. Probably not, but I don't know. It's as good an excuse as anything else. It's certainly more likely than they woke up that morning looking for me. And really, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I don't have any power to talk to them about it, but I can live with, I don't know. I just do not know. And then live with the fact that I'll never know, maybe. I mean, maybe it'll be on the news and but I don't know, and I don't need to know. I mean, I might be curious, and maybe we can watch them as they drive up down the road and they really are driving like an asshole. But that has no bearing on, I mean, that again, we're getting into labeling an error in thought. And can we let go of that need to justify our own existence at the expense of someone else? Have you not ever made a mistake? I know that I have. I ran a stop sign the other couple of weeks ago, and actually hit a car, which is why I'm afraid to drive at night. One of the reasons. So I would hope. I know I began doing this, and just sort of as a refresher. I mean, having studied and practiced and taught nonviolent communication, these are skills that are important in beginning to engage in nonviolent communication. And I'd like to revisit that with us over time. How to be a nonviolent communicator. So for those who would like to help me in my research, at the end of every day, write down some negative thoughts, some errors in thinking that are attached to those negative thoughts. And then what's a rational thought that you can engage in when that happens again? And only by doing this regularly will you actually begin to make the changes. If nothing else, this will remind you to make those changes the next time it happens. And sometimes you won't. Sometimes you'll revert back to the negative thinking pattern. But eventually, over time, your first thought will be the rational thought. And the rational thought allows space for joy, allows space for compassion and connection. The negative thought cuts you off from everything. It disconnects. you know, from a Buddhist perspective, you know, it's getting trapped in the cycle of hell, hunger, anger, animality. There's a lot of animality involved in our errors of thinking. So, you know, what I'd like to do is, you don't have to share with me your individual daily negative. I mean, you can if you want to. Certainly wouldn't, you know, prohibit you from doing it. But I'd like to know, after doing this for the next 3 months, as we begin the new year, what changes have you noticed? Will you have noticed any changes? Things that you begin to do differently. Maybe you won't. Maybe what you're doing is so ingrained that it'll take 6 months. I doubt it. If you do this regularly, every day for 3 months, I'll bet you see some changes. So anyway, any questions on that? I don't want to rush through the explanations or anything. Any questions?
Should we record, like if we're going to do this, should we record it as it happens, or kind of like reflect like after, you know, the day, or just like kind of carry around, like, you know, take note, you know, as it happens, or, you know, just kind of.
What will work for you?
Probably end of the day reflection sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's
That's what I'm doing. I mean, I carry a notebook with me everywhere, and I write everything down. I didn't used to do that, but for the past 8, 9 or so years, you know, I just got to thinking, putting things on my cell phone just meant extra labor. You know, you have to turn the phone on. You have to get to the app. You have to fiddle around with that micro keyboard. And then you have to remember that you did it and you put it someplace, and then you have to go and find it. And that wasn't working. What's that?
And you need battery life.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, with my notebook, I've got it. And my memory actually began, I mean, you know, it's bad now, and I think that's probably some old age, some medication. It's a combination of things. If I wasn't writing things down, it'd probably be even much worse. But I remember things better. And also I process things much better because I can write them down. I can write that thought down and remind myself and think about it. And it's not a fleeting thought. So anyway, however you do it, whether it's in the moment or whether it's at the end of the day. Now I will say, and this isn't part of this, but I will say to this 3-column journal, what I add is I add an additional 2 panes, two squares, if you will. One square is, what did I see today? Just making a note of anything that I saw. That, you know, at the end of the day, what memory of things I saw? What, you know, it might be just one thing, or it might be many things. You know, yesterday, you know, I actually was standing outside on the back, by my back door, and watching the goldfinches and the bird feeder. Not a very significant thing, but, you know, it was pleasing to stand there and watch the goldfinches on the bird feeder. You know, overlooking the backyard. My back door is about 20 feet off the ground, and it's not a deck, it's just a little landing there. I'm hoping that I can save up enough money to extend it out maybe 4 feet or so and be able to actually put a chair and a table there. So I just kind of lean on the rail, and I was looking out over the backyard. You know, when you're 20 feet off the ground, it's a pretty different view than when you're right at ground level. So it's kind of fun. You know, it's like floating in the air. So I wrote that down. Then the other pane, the other panel is, what do I remember from yesterday? You know, that's a really tough one. And when I was writing in my journal, I tried not to refer back to my notebook. just think about, okay, well, what am I remembering from yesterday? And yeah, so you don't have to add those two panels of what did you see and what do you remember. But if you wouldn't mind doing this, and again, I do believe that this is for your own good, but I can't sit here and tell you to do this. But it does. I will say, in the greater scheme of things, thinking about this, nonviolent communication and Buddhism, a nonviolent communication. One of the things, that what I really like about nonviolent communication is it is the tools that the Buddha didn't teach of how to practice Buddhism. So, we have this wonderful teaching from the Buddha and our practice. And a lot of times we just simply do not know how to do it because the instruction manual in Buddhism is sometimes rather vague. And it doesn't talk about life as we live it today. And so nonviolent communication is actually, it plugs in exactly with Buddhism. And so it's sort of the how-to manual of the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts of Buddhism in today's world. So, okay, any questions? So whenever you want to record it, do so. Anybody else? Questions? No? Okay, so I'm going to, everybody got the whiteboard there? The 3 columns?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Let's stop sharing. Okay, so I'll go back to this. All right, and what time is it? We're at 10:35. All right. So continuing, and I'm leaving the recording on, and so what I'm going to start doing is when I feel that the material warrants it, I'll be posting these recordings, the audio, onto the blog, and there will be a separate tab going forward that you can just put at the top of the menu bar. You can just click on recordings, and that'll list all the blogs that have audio or video recordings to them. And so I have to go back. At first, it'll just be from this point forward, but there's a lot of recordings on the blog, and I'll just have to go through and find out where they are and then tag them so that they'll pop up when you click on that link. So if you forget this, if something you want to jog your memory, you can always go back and look at that. So last week we talked about why we recite the 10 Suchnesses 3 times, and I wanted to go back to that a little bit, just briefly today, with some examples. So we have the 3 factors are the manifest body, the Dharma body, and the result body. So the Nirmanakaya, Dharmakaya, and Sambhogakaya that we read also in verses for opening the sutra. So let me put this. So let's bring this to our lives. So Bill, we'll start with Bill here. I know the most about Bill because Bill used to come to the temple, and well, he still does, but he would come to the physical temple there in Charlotte. And so, I know Bill. And so, Bill, so we've got Bill Buck, who's got a birth certificate, who shows up for work and collects a paycheck. So we've got that Bill Buck, and that's the manifest body. That's the Bill Buck that we all know and love, and that everybody knows and loves and comes to depend on. And that's just Bill Buck. That's not Bill Buck, the caterer. That's not Bill Buck, the martial artist. That's not Bill Buck, the bass guitar. That's just Bill Buck. All right? Now, Bill has various dharmas, if we will, and we'll use a little d dharma as opposed to the Buddha dharma. Bill has his martial arts dharma, teaching, his martial arts teaching. He has his catering skills, teaching. He has his bass guitar instructor teachings. He has his guitar performance teaching that he learned. So he plays gigs in restaurants and sometimes backing up prominent musicians or teching prominent musicians like Chubby Checker. So that's Bill Buck, the Dharma Bill Buck, all right? The Dharma Body. So that's Bill Buck, who's influenced by these various teachings. So we have Bill Buck, the manifest body that we all see has a physical presence, a little bit of white hair on the top, glasses, pretty solemn expression right now, staring at his computer screen. That's Bill Buck, the manifest body. That's who we see. What we don't see is the teachings that have influenced him. Okay? And then we have Bill Buck, the reward body. Bill Buck, the reward body, is the person who plays in the restaurant while the people are dining, and he's just background. Bill Buck, the martial artist, is the black belt, I don't know, whatever he is, and is top of the, he also teaches martial arts. So these are rewards. This is Bill Buck's reward body. Bill Buck teching for Chubby Checker. That's a pretty cool reward. You know, Bill Buck voted the #1 bass guitar instructor of all Charlotte, North Carolina. That's a pretty good reward. So that's Bill Buck's reward body. All right? Does that make sense? A few heads are nodding. Okay. All right. So Bill, you understand, right? And Trey, you know, I know less about Trey. So Trey, we've got Trey, who has a birth certificate, and I don't know, are you working, Trey? Do you have a job?
No, currently, no.
Okay, so we have Trey who shows up for school classes and gets grades, right?
Right.
Okay, we won't say what the grades are, but we have Trey who shows up for class and says present, you know, when they call his name, or logs onto his computer, whatever. So we have that Trey. So we have Trey, the manifest body, the person we see right now, how he manifests. And of course, you know, we know that changes over time. Then we have Trey, the Dharma body, who's the, wait, let me remember. I had it on the tip of my tongue. Wait, don't tell me. Cultural anthropologist. Yes? Did I get it? Okay, so that's Trey. So he's studying to be a cultural anthropologist.
Wow.
All right. So, and we also have Trey just recently, who's studying to be a dog owner of a new dog, who's studying to be a daddy. He has other dogs, but every dog is different, and it's a learning experience. And so, being a dog's father, it changes from dog to dog. So we have learning that skill or relearning that skill. And there are other things about Trey that I do not know, but there are many. Trey's a complicated person, and as we all are. And so there's other things that he's learned from. And then Trey's reward body is, you know, grades in school, a dog that doesn't poop on the carpet, you know, a compassionate partner, a good relationship, all of these things. That's our reward for the Dharma that we practice, okay? So if we, you know, like when I was in college, majoring in Japanese art and literature, art and culture, you know, if I hadn't studied anything, I wouldn't know anything. And so my Dharma would have been no study, and my reward would have been no reward. But I studied hard. I played World of Warcraft very hard. Anybody know World of Warcraft? A couple of people are, Bill doesn't know. So World of Warcraft is a massively multi player online game, MPPOG or something like that. I forget what anyway, but there are thousands of people playing at the same time you are. and you're engaging with hundreds of them at a time, and your own little role. So I was I quit after the expansion that took it up to level 80. But I was a level 80 ice mage. I like, I like just, firing off those big icy bolts and freezing somebody to death. And, it's pretty, I was awesomely powerful, but very weak, because mages only have cloth for armor. So we can kill people from far, far away, and we can kill them pretty fast. And we've got lots of, resources as an ice mage. But we can't defend ourselves. So you have to have good friends who'll defend you. Anyway, so my dharma of being online, decompressing from my studies, was World of Warcraft, and my reward was be a level 80 ice mage. So it can be funny, it can be inconsequential, it can be important, whatever the things are that influence us. So Davey there is a stage manager for theaters in the UK. And so, but there's Davey who, was born, who has a birth certificate, who, gets paid, shows up for classes, these kinds of things. And Davey's Dharma is stage management, studying about stage production. Learning everything about costume creation and set design and special effects and all that. Doesn't mean that he does those things, but he certainly has to know about them so that he can tell other people, you did that wrong, or do it this way. So Davey's Dharma is stage management, and Davey's manifestation, his reward, is being the #1 stage manager in all of Little Theatre, UK, and that's what we're aiming for, right, Davey?
Absolutely.
Have your own production company. You and your partner, you and your partner have your own production company. You want to make it bigger so that you can be rich and support me.
That's the dream.
So you can be rich and support yourselves. You can fly us all to London to watch one of your plays.
Absolutely.
So anyway, so does that make that a little bit less cloudy, a little bit less incomprehensible, a little less esoteric?
Far less esoteric form of us. So, yeah.
So, last week when I talked about, we have the Buddha, Shakyamuni, who was born Prince Siddhartha. That's his manifest body. The guy sitting under the tree, in peaceful repose, that's a manifest body. The Dharma body is the Dharma that he taught throughout the various stages of his life, leading up to and culminating with the Lotus Sutra. The reward body is the eternal Buddha. So in various other sutras, the reward body was not as the eternal Buddha. It may have been as medicine Buddha, or any one of a number of other, green Tara Buddha, or whatever, any number of other manifestations or emanations of the eternal Buddha. But in the Lotus Sutra, the reward is the eternal Buddha. This concept of Buddhism that transcends time and space, the concept of enlightenment, of an enlightened Buddha that is not dependent upon a manifest body of Prince Siddhartha Gautama. Some heads twisting, and wrap your head around that.
Observation with what you just said, which may or may not be correct, but when we study the path that Buddha actually took, this is what finding the words or explanation kind of difficult. He actually was discovering all these things that do not work to come up with the right answer, and that's kind of either counterintuitive or not necessarily the best way to do anything, because up until, the asceticism didn't work. That's just one example. We don't need to go through all of them, but he he found a whole lot of things that did not work before he actually did the teaching. So it seems, actually teaching what does work, how did he discover it is a question, I guess.
Yeah, so, we can look to the Buddha and eliminate the things that he tried that didn't work, such as asceticism or a merely intellectual endeavor, which he did before the asceticism.
Right.
And then we say, okay, well, he did all of that. And that wasn't how he got enlightened. And he never advised or taught those as paths to enlightenment. And so we can just say, okay, well, that's not what we need to do. What we need to do is what he taught as the path to enlightenment. And that begins with the Four Noble Truths and continues all the way, culminates with the Lotus Sutra. And in my book, Lectures on the Lotus Sutra, I just make a little plug here, but that's a good place to go, is you understand why we had all of these other teachings and how they get us to the Lotus Sutra. And so when we study the Lotus Sutra, we are in fact studying all the other previous teachings. The Four Noble Truths are in the Lotus Sutra. The Eightfold Path is in the Lotus Sutra. The 12-link chain of causation is in the Lotus Sutra. All of these things are fundamental Buddhist teachings that are found universally throughout all major Buddhist denominations. They're not taught in all Buddhist denominations, but they're the foundations of Buddhism. And they're all in the Lotus Sutra. And so the Lotus Sutra embraces all of these other things and gives it to you in one fell swoop. That was the Buddha's ultimate destination, the ultimate goal of his teaching. That makes sense? Okay. Any questions from anybody? No? Wonderful. Well, if you think of questions later on, please jot them down and bring them to us. And so we're going to end the recording now, and we're going to begin our service, a brief service. And today is the last Sunday of the month. And so we do tradition here at the temple that I try to observe. Sometimes I forget. But we'll do our prayer for the sick today. So I'm stopping the recording.